All right, team, we have to update you on the story of Navy SEAL Eddie Gallagher. This has gotten attention all the way up the chain to the President of the United States. This has now led to the firing of the Chief of the Navy. I want to bring in somebody who can tell us exactly what's going on here because he's been talking to the Gallagher family all along, very involved in this. Our friend Tyler Merritt, he is the founder and CEO of Nine Line Apparel. He's a former special operations pilot. Tyler, thanks for giving us some of your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to be back.
Can just for everybody listening, give us the a short but a review of what happened with Chief Gallagher, and leave out the last few days, but just how did he find himself in the crosshairs of the United States military justice system?
Yeah, I think it's a really systemic issue that needs to be exposed. You have senior leaders in the military that like to make careers out of cases like this. You have legal officers who've never stepped foot in combat who get wind of some allegations, but rather than investigate them properly prior to bringing charges, as in done in a civilian court, the UCMJ process is very archaic and hasn't been updated in quite some time. And I hope that when the American public really look into this issue and when they read Gallagher's book, which I hope comes out in the near future, they'll see just how messed up this is. Because nowhere in the civilian world can you try to put a mole in the jury pool, from your senior leadership, say, hey, I want you to be on the jury, and find this guy guilty regardless of the facts. Nowhere in the civilian world can you go and spy on the opposing counsel's computer, go see everything they're typing, everything they have in their file, so you know what their plan is going to court. And these things occurred. These are the things that we were about to expose prior to the Secretary of the Navy resigning. And that's just a few of the instances that led to this. But Eddie Gallagher didn't murder anyone. He was actually trying to save the ISIS fighter's life at the behest of the Iraqi general. And his comrade, another Navy SEAL, actually suffocated this individual as a mercy kill because they knew that this Iraqi general was going to continue to torture, most likely rape, until they got all the information out of this 15-year-old ISIS fighter, and he decided to put him out of that misery. This individual has already been hit by a Hellfire missile that we fired into his compound because he was carrying a cell phone that we were tracking, and he's a bad guy, regardless of his age. And that's war. War is absolute hell. And I hope everyone understands that people like Eddie, war fighters, they don't want to go to war, but they're willing and able to do the things that are necessary to keep us safe.
Now, he was found not guilty of those charges, as I understand it, but they did get him, they did find a guilty verdict on the charge of posing with a corpse. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at the picture, it's Eddie and 11 other individuals, to include his superior officers. And at the behest of that senior leadership, he did pose with that dead ISIS fighter. And that is not anything that justifies it, but he was one of many that did this. And just so everyone understands, he's the only one who was found guilty of this crime. And that is not good order discipline. Good order and discipline applies to everyone.
Sorry to interrupt, Tyler, but I just want to understand, how could one guy in a photo with a bunch of other guys be found guilty for being in a photo and then don't bring charges against anybody else?
Well, let's take a step back. So at this point, they just think that the senior leadership, the JAG attorneys trying to make their career case, they think that they have this slam dunk case. When the evidence starts to come out, they don't want to acknowledge it. When they start to realize that the narrative that they were fed was a false narrative, the facts that they thought they had were not facts, they found only one thing that they could find him absolutely guilty on, because it's a picture, right? So this is a court-martial that's going on of the many, many charges that were levied against him after he spent 9 months in prison. The only one that they could find him guilty on was this one. So rather than going and charging the rest of the platoon, they just decided, we're going to use this one charge that we could find him guilty on, and we're going to try to exact as much punishment as we can on this individual because he's embarrassed us. He's went on TV. He's made us look bad. And now you have egos involved. You have Admiral Green, who is a very egocentric individual who is turned out to be just one of the most despicable commanders. If you look at what he was doing to Eddie, usurping the commander-in-chief's intent. This individual had just one thing out in mind for Eddie, and was destroy his life. So if he couldn't put him in prison and Eddie embarrassed him, well, by darn, I'm going to reduce his rank. And they did. And when the president says, give him his rank back, that's ridiculous.
Wait, hold on. Because I want to ask about the president. So President Trump did intervene even before the issue of rank, as I understand it. And we're speaking to Tyler Merritt. He's a former special operations pilot. He's the CEO of 9 Line Apparel. You guys see me wearing the T-shirts on a fairly regular basis on Instagram. I want to ask you, where did the president first come in? Because my understanding is, Tyler, that Trump made sure that Eddie's confinement wasn't as punitive and essentially wasn't locked in with a bunch of like rapists and murderers. What happened?
So just so you know, in the very beginning, there was a narrative pushed to the president that said, hey, there's a video out there. It's really bad. It basically shows Eddie killing this guy, and just don't intervene. And I actually got to see the video before the president, and we made sure that he was able to see it, and it essentially exonerates Eddie. And at that point, he intervened and said, get this man out of prison. Yeah, let him go through the court martial. He'll be fine, not guilty. Let due process occur, but get him out of prison, because he should have never been there. So instead of getting him out of prison and let him go home to see his family, they get him out of prison and create a new prison on base. They put him in confinement commensurate with prison. So he couldn't leave. He couldn't go anywhere. No one could come and see him. But he was in barracks instead of a jail cell, which is basically the same if you've ever lived in barracks. Then the president said, that's ridiculous. Let him have the free ability to go meet with counsel, because at this point, he wasn't even allowed to talk to his lawyers without someone from the chain of command who is spying on him listening to every single word. Eddie had to talk in code. Whenever I talked to him, he had to talk in code. And they listened and eavesdropped to every conversation. They listened, and they wouldn't give him a computer to talk to his attorney. They were trying to restrict him from having any ability to defend himself. The president intervened again, said, this will stop. And they eventually allowed him to do that. Then he goes through the court martial. Then he gets found not guilty of all charges except this one. And then they decide to exact revenge by taking away his rank and trying to have him retire as an E6 rather than an E8. And then when they heard that the president was going to restore his rank, one day prior to that, they submitted his paperwork for retirement as an E6. And Eddie has spent the last several weeks trying to get that undone so he can retire as an E8 after the president ordered that he be restored of rank. And then, because they couldn't do anything else, they wanted to unceremoniously kick him out of the Navy, and not as a Navy SEAL, and take away his trident. One last just slap in the face to not only Eddie, but the President of the United States. And then you have one last text and tweet from him, I'm sure hoping that the Sec Navy would step in and stop this ridiculousness, basically saying, Eddie needs to be left alone. Go about your business. Hey, Secretary of Navy, you're already over budget. You're doing a horrible job running the Navy. Recruitment is going to be hurt forever trying to get your young men and women to join the elite forces of the Navy, because we've shown to the American public we don't have your back. You're going to go overseas and be expected to navigate the atrocities of war and hope that when you return, you don't go to jail for the rest of your life. Because Eddie would have went to jail for the rest of his life if he was found guilty.
Yeah, he was accused initially of premeditated murder and attempted murder. So, the initial charges were as severe as it gets, and then he ends up
mandatory minimum life in jail.
Yeah, and they wanted to get him on just something. So now you have the Navy Secretary Richard Spencer, who I think you said resigned. My understanding is he was fired. I mean, he wrote a resignation letter after being told you're done. So I guess we could say, did he resign? Was he fired? He go back and forth with this, but he's out for sure.
Oh, he was fired.
Yeah, he was fired.
2 days ago, he said, I'm not resigning. I'm in my position, and I serve at the will and the pleasure of the President of the United States. Well, guess what? The president was not pleased with your subordinates completely disregarding his intent, which his intent was very clear, whether it's in a tweet or an official memorandum. Go back to business. Leave Eddie Gallagher alone. He wants to protect our warfighters who have gone and done honorable things. Eddie did not dishonor himself by taking just one picture. Maybe it was a lapse in judgment. Maybe he should have walked away. He was amongst a chain of command that endorsed it. And I'm not going to say that it was right or wrong, but let's go back to, say, Vietnam era. Yeah, Eddie's not chopping off ears and making necklaces. He's not glorifying this death. They closed with and they killed the enemy, and a lot of times it's used for biometrics. But in this case, it was probably not the greatest decision. But to single out one individual because you couldn't find him guilty based on a false narrative, yeah, that just goes to show that these Navy prosecutors, they had every intent of making a name for themselves because they're not war fighters.
Yeah, I was going to ask, Tyler, you were a war fighter, and you were Apache pilot, and you served in combat, and I just want to know, why would the Secretary of the Navy here, this guy Spence, former now Secretary of the Navy, write this letter where he talks about, I think it was good discipline and order or something that civilians, a phrase that I'm sure military hears all the time. What is he trying to say with that?
It's a catch-all. It's when you can't find a reason to get someone in trouble, you just say it's this generalized good order and discipline. And right now, they're still planning on taking the tridents of two other individuals that weren't even in that picture. They weren't even there. They were just testifying on Eddie's behalf that he is a good soldier, that he is an honorable Navy SEAL. And because of that, they're going to take their trident. They went against the chain of command. And I'll tell you, Eddie walks around, Coronado in the SEAL base. He's getting high fives. He's getting bro hugs. The general military population supports Eddie Gallagher because they've been in his shoes. Your elitist, non-combatant military members, they are the problem. These are the Navy JAG Corps that will go from being defender, they'll be on the defense team, then they'll be on the prosecution team, which is, again, very different than the civilian world. And they want to make a name for themselves. And a case like this is a career-making case if they win. So win at all costs despite the evidence.
Tyler Merritt, everybody, CEO of Nine Line Apparel, also former a veteran himself. Tyler, thank you so much for giving us your time, my friend. We'll talk soon.
Thank you. Have a good day.
It is fascinating to watch Democrats show us what their party is really all about in this primary. You see a lot of really insane positions getting airtime and support from mainstream Democratic candidates. You also see what is considered heresy with the Democratic Party, which I think in some ways is even more interesting. You have, for example, Joy Reid on MSNBC, which is very concerned with making sure that whoever wins the Democratic primary will be someone that MSNBC staff and people that work for the MSNBC on and off camera support. They want to have that connectivity to whoever the Democrat candidate is, because there's money involved as well as ideological reasons for this. Right? The access for these journos is very, very important. Joy Reid is perhaps most famous, at least in my mind, most famous for claiming that people hacked her blog from 10 years ago, and in her voice, in her pieces that she had posted on her blog, added homophobic slurs. That's right. Somebody went with hackers with a time machine here somehow, went back in time and changed what was published there. I don't understand how anybody could take this person seriously at this point as a TV pundit. She said that the FBI was investigating. That was her claim, and it managed. I remember I talked to Tucker Carlson on a show about it. I said, Tucker, she's going to get away with this because this is now the escape hatch. Oh well, the FBI is looking at it. No, I don't have the FBI to look at her. I've asked for an FBI investigation. Okay, I mean, I could ask for nuclear physicists to show up at my house tomorrow and build a reactor. I don't think that we're going to be doing fission in Buck's living room anytime soon, though. But I asked for it, so, I've done my part. It's ridiculous. But here's what she said about, they don't like Tulsi and they don't like Yang. And it's because they have some very small number of heterodox views. Yang and Tulsi are libs, progressives, no question. But they don't like that they stray from acceptable left-wing orthodoxy on some of these issues. So we have, for example, Joy Reid here saying this of Tulsi Gabbard. Play clip 3, please.
Yeah, she uses the term regime change wars a lot, which is a common term, in my understanding of the way that Russia talks about the United States.
If you listen to that rhetoric, you would think that the U.S. started a war in Syria, which did not happen. That was part of the Arab Spring. If you remember, if we rewind all of this, that war has been going on for so long now that was part of the Tunisian, Libyan, Egyptian, Syria, Yemen. There are many uprisings that happened during that time. The U.S. didn't start those.
Oh, boy. First of all, let's just be very clear about this. She is saying here, Joy Reid is saying here, that it's a talking point. It's a talking point from Russia to bring up regime change wars, which liberals have been talking about regime change wars for years. For years. I mean, now all of a sudden it's a Russia talking point, and then I don't even know who the host. I just have the audio. I don't know who the other host is. Someone on MSNBC. He goes, yes, well, we didn't start. Yeah, Tulsi's point. I can't believe I'm sitting here defending Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi's point is that if we stay in Syria long enough, the only way that we could have a long-term plan that doesn't involve us just fighting a defensive war over territory that is not U.S. territory that we don't want would be if we help get rid of the Assad regime, which was the Obama administration's policy. Assad has got to go. That's what they were saying. That's what they wanted to do. We armed opposition there, so it was a regime change war. So they don't even know what they're talking about. It is a regime change war, depending on when you're talking about it and what the circumstances of U.S. military intervention are. And this is a Russia talking point? I mean, here I am having to defend Tulsi and Yang from Democrats saying crazy stuff about them, but they forget the most important thing. And this is really, I said they have heterodox views. That might even be giving Yang and Tulsi too much credit. But they've forgotten this. Getting Trump and defeating Trump and crushing Trump, destroying the Trump movement is all that matters. That is all. Everything else is just, who cares? If it is effective as a weapon against Trumpism, if it is effective as a means of preventing the president from winning the next election, that is what matters. That is what is real to Democrats. That's it. Everything else is some distant, who cares situation. And Yang and Tulsi don't fit into that enough. And that's really why they're a problem for the left. That's really why they upset as many Democrats, particularly in the media, as they do.
Americans tuned in to the debate earlier this week, and they saw that I got called on less than any other candidate, including candidates that I'm polling higher than. And the questions I did get had virtually nothing to do with the core ideas of my campaign. And if this were an isolated incident, that would be one thing. But if you go back over the last number of months, MSNBC has literally omitted me from over a dozen fundraising and polling graphics, which it's not about me. It's about the 300,000 plus Americans who've donated to and support my campaign, and the millions of Americans who know we need to rewrite the rules of the 21st century economy to work for us. Think about those people donating $10, $20 of their hard-earned money to put a candidate on the stage and then have MSNBC virtually ignore me for 32 minutes, or when they tune into MSNBC to see how we're doing in the polls, it's like I don't exist. And you can go through the records, you can see they've done it to me over and over again. And I'm not the kind of guy who takes offense easily, but at this point you have to call it like you see it.
He's right, by the way, because I've seen it. I've seen the polls that he's talking about, or I've seen particularly on fundraising numbers, they'll have like the big five, whoever that would be. From memory, I think it was, Biden, Warren, Bernie, Buttigieg, and I think maybe it was Harris at the time. And meanwhile, he was like ahead of Harris in fundraising for that quarter or for that month or whatever. They keep doing this. They keep excluding this guy from not the subjective, who are we going to do a profile on today? Those are the ways that bias can be very present in journos covering these things, but it's harder to call that out because there's no hard and fast data that we're talking about, right? But when it's fundraising numbers, which has to be shared by the campaigns, is out there, and you're going to do, the top 5 fundraisers, and you actually go 1, 2, 3, 4, and then number 6, and you leave out Andrew Yang, and this happens again and again, you start to think, what's the problem here? What exactly are they? And it's because he's not of the establishment. You have to remember, all these journos, these media organizations, these Democrat consultants and pollsters, this is all a real level of society unto itself. This is an echelon of American political culture, and they know each other. There's a lot of inside baseball stuff that goes on here. And Yang is not from within that culture, so they don't particularly like him. He doesn't seem like he's going to be the windfall for a lot of the established Democrat consultants in the space and all the rest of it. He's shown a willingness to talk to conservatives in media. I've interviewed Andrew Yang, I think at least once, maybe twice, can't remember now, but he'll talk to people on the other side, which Democrats don't like that anymore. They don't want that to happen. You anger them when you do this. But as I pointed out to you before, I mean, his biggest sin, as far as they're concerned, is that Andrew Yang believes. I'm sitting here. I should be like doing PR for the guy, but I'm really not. I just think that we're seeing what the reality. He exposes realities of the Democratic Party today that we should be aware of. And what he shows us is that it doesn't matter if you're somebody who wants to put more money in the pockets of or put more food on the table of working people, and you want to do something the Democrats aspirationally claim. They say they want to do these things. That doesn't matter if you aren't on the same sheet of music, if you're not on board for destroying Trump first and foremost. I mean, play clip 11. Here's Yang's greatest sin.
I am on board with impeachment. I think that Democrats are right to move forward. No, we have to face facts that not a single Republican has crossed party lines to support these impeachment proceedings, and we need literally dozens of Republican senators to join the Democrats in the Senate if impeachment is going to be successful. So we have to be realistic about what the prospects are, and to me, my focus as a candidate is solving the problems that got Donald Trump elected in the first place and helping move the country forward. When we're talking about Donald Trump, we are losing, and that includes in the context of impeaching Donald Trump. We need a new positive vision that Americans can see themselves in, a new way forward.
No, Democrats aren't okay with this. No positive vision, no way forward, no alternative view for the country's future. Destroy Trump. That's all that matters. And you're not allowed to say things like, look, he says he's for impeachment. I know, but he's like, but I mean, come on, guys. Like, where is this really going? Not allowed to do that. Got to wait till this thing is over before you can point out how much of an exercise in sound and fury signifying nothing this whole proceeding really is. When we are talking about Donald Trump, we are losing, and that includes the context of impeaching Donald Trump. That's right. Not okay for Democrats. They don't want to hear that. Pelosi and Schiff and all the rest of them, they don't want to be told that there's anything more important than impeaching Trump, and that anybody would even say that maybe this isn't going to work out the way the Democrats planned. He's unacceptable to them. But there was another moment that really just caught my attention before we move on to some other important things here. Kamala Harris, who I think people have just figured out that they really, the media, the elites within the Democratic Party really wanted Harris to get a lot of support, and they had this feeling that maybe Harris would be able to make it all come together, make it all happen, right? They really wanted that, and yet she's just not a very talented politician. She just doesn't have it. It's not there for whatever reason. She has not caught really any momentum. They've just been pushing her along, hoping that she's going to be somebody who is a formidable candidate. And if anything, she's probably hurt her long-term political aspirations with this presidential run. Not quite as much as Beto O'Rourke, but certainly I think you could argue this has been a net negative for Kamala Harris. But she said that, and she said this, and I can tell you, there are not going to be any journos who push on this. They're not going to ask any real questions of her relating to this. But she she said this about drug companies, and you got to hear this. Play 4.
But essentially what we're going to do is set drug prices so that American consumers are charged a price for drugs that is the average price that's being charged around the globe. And there's a huge difference. Insulin being an example. The other thing is this. If people don't want to cooperate with that, I'm also going to do the next thing, which is this. A lot of drugs, prescription medication, was born out of federal funding for the research and development of that drug. Your taxpayer dollars. So for any drug where they failed to play by our rules, and if that drug came about because of federal funding for what's called R&D, research and development, I will snatch their patent so that we will take over. And yes, we can do that. Yes, we can do that. Yes, we can do that. It's the question is, do you have the will to do it? I have the will to do it.
She has the will to do it. Nationalizing drug companies is how far away from this? We're just going to take it. The government's just going to take it. This is a glimpse into the kind of authoritarian socialism that you can expect will be increasingly prominent for Democrats if they get their way and if they are back in power. We're just going to snatch their patent. I mean, the patent is a protection of private property. It's like saying, well, we're just going to snatch the contract that says we're going to pay them X amount of dollars and just say, sorry, you don't have that anymore. It's going to snatch their patents away. But Elizabeth Warren does this too. This is the wellspring of so much socialist policy. It's a justification for any socialist policy that they can conjure up to say that the roads. It's not that a private company created a new service and will provide the American people with this incredible bounty of the last 100 years thanks to capitalism in America. I mean, this country has just been on an economic growth tear. I mean, we have been doing so well. But they can come along now, the Democrats, the statists will come along and say that even if your company didn't get a government grant, and she's talking here about, research, that a lot of research into drugs comes from other research. So how many layers of research removed does it have to be from government-sponsored research for you to get your patent? She also just has no idea really what she's talking about with R&D and drugs. I mean, this is just something that she's come up with to say, we're just going to make the drug companies charge you less based on political whim. What do you think that's going to do to those very, very expensive processes in place that are FDA required and mandated for new drug approvals? From start to finish, they estimate it takes about $1 billion to get a new drug to market. That's very expensive. And it is not the rest of the world that is coming up with all kinds of new pharmaceuticals and miracle drugs and things all the time. America leads the way in that because of the capitalist system that we have. But as I look at this, I have to say I find it disconcerting how quickly you will hear Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, and others resort to, well, even if that company didn't get government loans or it wasn't a joint public-private venture or anything like that, because their workers went to public school mostly, and because they drove on roads that the federal government, set up, and because they used, phone lines, and because their parents were drawing Social Security checks, whatever, we basically all own it. What they're doing is just making an argument about collectivism, a collective ownership of property, because I could make that argument about absolutely anything now. So what is private and what is public just becomes a function of what the people in power, what the libs, the left, says at any point in time. Is your house really your house? Or is your house the result of government loans over time, government workers that are getting, support and subsidy from, whether it's from straight up welfare programs or from entitlement programs or, You know, your house is only valuable because of the power lines that have been run through the neighborhood, because of the street that was paved in front of it, because of the workers that built your house who were raised going to public schools in America, paid for by taxpayer dollars. You know, some of them maybe grew up in public housing, whatever the case may be. You can always find a way to justify this. Well, it's not really your house. And I would note that there already is a concern and argument it's not really your house because of taxes, where you pay property taxes, you rent your house even if you own it from the government. Because you have to pay for those government services for that house at any point in time. You don't even own your house. So we're already much closer to collective ownership in many ways in the government's eyes than we realize. But now they're saying it so openly. Now they're telling us that at any point in time, they may just decide that that's not really yours. Whatever that company asset is, it's not really yours. The public needs it more. This mentality was even enshrined by a very poor Supreme Court decision that said that if there's an eminent domain for private use even, then they could seize property. You know, if they're going to build a mall that's really helpful for the neighborhood and they got to get rid of your house, well, then they're going to take your house. So much for private property rights, not for even government purpose, for private purpose. So we have been losing our rights to private property for a long time, and the discourse around it now is just becoming more open and really more aggressive. You know, this is Obama's, you didn't build that. You didn't build that. Remember? It was all the other people that did stuff before you. I mean, you could say that none of us have achieved anything in our lives because it was only a result of the United States government mobilizing and winning the Second World War and defeating fascism that we even aren't sitting around speaking German today, right? So, I mean, we didn't do anything. Thank you, government, for everything. Oh, bow down and worship at the altar of government, because without government action, none of us would be here. I mean, this is absurd. There are no outer limits. There's no limiting principle to this theory. But Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, and others will say it. We'll take your patent. We'll take whatever we want to take because it's not really yours. They also think this way about taxes. You'll notice that too. Tax cuts are an expense, they will say. No, expenses are expenses. Tax cuts is taking less from you. But the way that this is framed, you start to see that the people who really believe that government is capable of creating utopia if only given the power and should be involved in every aspect of our lives, they also believe that your property is only whatever the government deigns to let you keep. That has not worked out very well in other places.
Let's talk about the fact that in America, it is a tragedy that women make only 80 cents on the dollar, but black women are making 61 cents on the dollar. And we could go on and on down the list talking about the fact that when we talk about what we need, what we want, and who we are in terms of leadership, there is incredible work that is happening, and there is so much work to be done.
Do you think any journos will ask Kamala Harris about this statistic? A lot of your business owners who listen to this, I know because you write in, you tell me about it. Also just based on the fact that we got hundreds of thousands of people listening across the country, I figure that some of you are owning businesses. If you could get somebody to do the exact same quality of work, and I mean for any of your employees, you get the exact same quality of work, the same hours, the same work history and expertise beforehand, and you could save 40% in labor costs. Would you pass that up? I mean, think about this. How, because the allegation here is that it's discrimination. It's discrimination against particularly African-American women in this case. Even if somebody was, and I'm not conceding this, even if somebody was a bit discriminatory in their outlook, the idea of saving 40 cents on the dollar for an employee would be a counterweight to their decision-making, you would think. Maybe this is just nonsense, just like the pay gap is nonsense. This is not true. If people could get the same work, the same labor, for 40% less, or even whatever it is, 20 or 30% less, they would say, business owners want to make money. They would say, I want to do that. But no one's going to challenge Kamala Harris on this. No one's going to challenge her on it. All the studies they use to come up with these numbers are nonsense. It makes no differentiation about previous work history, about hours in the office, about, they're just cooking the books on this all the time, but we have to keep hearing this. And they never push back on the lies. And then they lecture us about how Trump lies so much.